Longest Day is a podcast from a female-founded destination practice that believes that crisis isn't an if, it's a when. We are an organisation unafraid of crisis, but have never known one to be resolved in a single day. However long the day or night that gave rise to the crisis in the first place, there's always something we can learn. I'm Leah, the founder and CEO of Broadstairs Consulting, a problem-solving consultancy offering crisis and governance advisory services to help leaders and organisations thrive and flourish. We operate in the gap between legal and public relations, at the coalface of difficult situations, believing that most crises are avoidable and the impact of inevitable ones usually can be mitigated. Our guests have overcome a litany of crises. Many of our guests have worked with us in some capacity in the past. All of them have stories worth hearing. We trust them to make this worth your while. We hope it helps you trust us. Klaus M Nielsen is a speaker and mentor of communication and higher consciousness in London. By utilising his unique ability to apply ancient Eastern philosophy on modern problems, he provides simple solutions to complex challenges. He offers Vedic mentoring to CEOs, having spent 7 years living, serving, and studying as a monk in India, and over a decade travelling the world, where he was teaching Eastern thought, culture, and meditation practices. Klaus says that his life is arguably stranger than fiction. Growing up in a prosperous family in Denmark, he had all material opportunities at his disposal. A nagging feeling that something crucial was missing led him to explore subcultures. As a teenage hacker, radical left-wing activist, video game designer, and international EDM DJ. Disappointed to find hypocrisy everywhere, Klaus eventually decided to give up all his possessions and leave the material world behind. Then he embarked upon his spiritual journey. He believes, to put it simply, that the future is ancient. Well, Klaus, thank you for joining us today. We're really looking forward to hearing how philosophy and meditation helped you to deal with your longest day. So it's great to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Why don't you explain your longest day?
All right. My longest day was the day that I decided no longer to be a monk. Because being a monk is great. In many ways, it's awesome, right? Because it's a very simple lifestyle and it's very peaceful. And you are essentially liberated simply by your way of life. There are no bills, there are no problems. You don't follow politics, right? All of these nagging things in life, they just don't exist. Now, the problem with that is it can become empty. So genuine fulfillment comes from being of service to the world. And I felt like I can do more service to the world. Initially, I started traveling and giving lectures as a monk, as a traveling spiritual teacher, which went well for a while. But I started to have this feeling that I was kind of part of a circus. Like there's a certain group of people where spirituality is like a religion, and they come to the temple and they bow down and they, do some rituals or whatever. And that's fine. That works for them. But I kind of felt sometimes I used the example of Goofy in Disneyland, where you see Goofy in Disneyland. Everyone wants a picture with Goofy in Disneyland, but nobody really cares what Goofy has to say or who's inside the Goofy costume. So my robes, that had become like a Goofy costume, right? And so I started developing this idea of working with business leaders, and because these people do a lot of things, but they don't waste time, and so maybe they'll listen. And I see the world; everyone's burning out. It's like it's really gotten to an intense level at this point. Now, the problem was there was a big expectation that I would be the next big guru. I was like being groomed for a great career in spirituality, you could say, right? And I just felt like, no, this is not actually the right way to do it. And so I was battling with that. Now, the way it culminated was I had been on a tour of North America. And during that, I had done this thing called Ask a Monk. I would sit in public spaces where you wouldn't normally see a monk, with a little rudimentary sign that said, "Ask a monk any topic." And then I would have conversations with random people, would come over and start a conversation. It was beautiful. It was a wonderful, it was not some of the best days of my life were those afternoons. Now that went a little bit viral. And so when I came back to India, I was exhausted thinking, now I can get back to my quiet life. I could not, because everyone knew me suddenly. It was like it came out of nowhere. And like the walk from my ashram where I stayed to the academy where I studied used to take 15 minutes. Now it took 45 minutes, right? And I was like freaking out. This is not, I need peace. I need to relax. And so I decided, okay, I'm gonna leave here as well. I'm gonna go to this little village in India where nobody knows me, and I'm just gonna take a little time out, right? And so I knew, like, that nagging feeling that this is not gonna last was kind of growing. And so I get to this village, and I get a room, and I'm just walking down to a temple. So I'm just walking down to this temple because I just want to, like, see what the temple is like. On that way, I meet another monk, and he says, "Hey, you're that guy. I saw you, and I was just talking about you with my friends, and we agreed we want to be just like you." And that was just the straw. There was something clicked inside me. I just looked at him, and I turned around 180, said nothing, and I just walked back to my room. And I spent a week in that room without leaving, just more or less a mental breakdown, because I've had this feeling I can't escape this version of me that has been built in the public. And so that, it was like the day after, that was my longest day, because I knew intuitively, instinctively, in my heart of hearts, that this is over. And I had no idea how to handle it, because living in that parallel universe for the better part of a decade, I didn't know how to shop. I didn't know how to pay bills. All of those programs that are automatic in most people had been removed and replaced by different programs, like of temple services and fire sacrifices and all of that. And that suddenly became abundantly clear to me. Like, I have no idea what to do. Like, how am I going to, and the fear was amplified by this thought that, well, I have all of this spiritual education. I give lectures on this, and I still have no idea what to do about it, right? That was a long day.
Why did you become a monk to begin with?
I burned out. I always, from my very early childhood, remember thinking there's something wrong here, like with the whole thing. Like, there's something wrong with the grown-ups. They're supposed to be in charge, but what they say and how they act and stuff, there's something wrong. And then school, and then I got into these subcultures. I was a hacker, and I was a political activist, and I was a skateboarder, and I went for it 100% every time. And some of them parallel to each other. Like, I had different groups of friends that didn't know each other, and I was almost like different people to these people. And I began, then, I found out the hacking wasn't really like, crime was it's just not for me, right? So I started making computer games, and I could create these universes where I decide I could play God in this little universe. And I made a good living from that. Like I was doing well, young, in my early 20s, no responsibilities, nice apartment in the posh area in Copenhagen. And I was feeling worse because I wasn't getting the fulfillment that I was seeking. And I also even found that in some of these subcultures, the hypocrisy was even greater, because a lot of the time, people who seek out subcultures are like broken in a sense, right? They want a strange identity to hang on to. And so I started drinking more, and I started showing up to work after a full night of clubbing. But because I was outperforming everyone, nobody cared. And so I started DJing, and, if you want, inner peace and tranquility, techno DJ in Berlin is just a terrible place for that. It's like really not a good idea. And so I burned out. I like hardcore burned out, and I didn't know what to do, because I felt like I have already achieved everything. Like I have my own company. I like arts or music. I had done that. I'd done the money. I'd done the girlfriends. I've done the drugs, and there is nothing here that will make me happy. So and I tried therapy and hypnosis and ayahuasca ceremony, all of these, whatever you try, right? Travel. And so the only thing I could think of was to then negate all of that.
To remove yourself from that environment.
If all of this is actually bringing me more frustration than happiness, then what happens if we just remove all of it, right? And there comes the idea of becoming a renunciate monk, right? And for a while it worked. I remember it distinctly that it took me a few months while I was in my bed sheets and new enthusiastic monk apprentice, and I realized that I was happy. I realized that I hadn't thought about whether or not I was happy for a long time, which meant that I just was. And this is one of those things you learn in the Eastern tradition, is your consciousness is by default happy. The reason we don't notice is because we're too busy looking for it in outside things, thinking that a car or a promotion or a certain amount of likes on a social media platform is going to provide that happiness. So ironically, in searching for happiness, we're distracting ourselves from it.
It seems ironic to me that finding that external validation as you became renowned for being a monk is the thing that caused you to have to step away from it.
Yeah.
How has your relationship with, I guess, people-pleasing and encouragement changed over the years?
I have certainly gotten better at it. I don't misunderstand this, but I really don't care what people think, because most of the time they're not thinking about me. That was one thing I've come to see, like looking back on my life. I overestimated how much people care about what I'm doing, like a lot, because most people are worried about what they're doing and what others might be thinking of them. And so I found in letting go of that tendency to people please, that I've actually become more trustworthy and more pleasing to be around, because I'm not trying to play a part, play a role. And that was also why, if we return to this longest day, that was part of the realization that I'm still playing a role here. I have to really embody this, what I've been training. And that was like the big test, you could say, where I trusted myself enough to not please. And there were a lot of people, and your respect for authority is a very traditional culture. And I just had to tell them all that, this is not happening. And then trust my heart that, no, this is the best thing. And it took a while, for some at least. There are some who they are not in my life anymore. They just didn't agree, and great, that's fine. But the important people, most of them accepted it immediately. They really, no, you don't want to do it, then don't do it, right? I was like, what do you mean? You can just do that? Like, And then there were a few who had maybe invested something emotionally themselves, where it took a little while for them to, all right, but in particular, my initiating guru, he thought that I would be great as a guru, right? And we had a clash. We definitely had a clash. There were a couple of years where we didn't have much contact. He passed away last year, and I spent the last month of his life with him. And at that time, everybody wants to see him. And he turned away some big names, you could say, but he kept me close. And he was, dare I say, proud of me, because he could see what I'm doing now. And I'm reaching out to these people who are very high performers and who have a lot of influence over other people's lives. So if I can soften them a little bit, not only they will be happier, but a lot of other people will also be happier. And he could see it, right? We just had a different idea of how that was supposed
what the medium was to deliver
exactly.
that.
What was the right? Yeah, exactly. And so I will say I vastly overestimated how much those things should influence me and my decision making. Right? And that's, I guess some people, it's very hard to overcome these things. And looking back also, this process I was going through with the monk training was, I wouldn't be able to do it in the way that I did it. I didn't offend anyone. I didn't lose my shit with anyone, right? And become offended and play the victim. I didn't do that. I just faded out and tried to explain myself if anyone wanted to talk, right? And I saved myself from a lot of trouble that way. But coming to the decision, that was very, very tough. Yeah.
We'll continue the interview after a short ad.
It's hard not to feel disillusioned by the fashion industry. To get that piece you want, you either have to compromise your budget, compromise the product quality, or compromise your ethics. But we believe there's a better way. Positive Retail brings you second-hand designer fashion that offers more than just a new fit. Our goal is to categorically change customer perceptions of resale and provide joy, protect the planet, and create community. Find us in stores in Margate, Ramsgate, and Deal, and online at positive-retail.com.
Let's pick up where we left off. You're obviously extremely successful. You're a very engaging keynote speaker. You are invited to lots of spaces to share your experiences and your knowledge. How did you get from your longest day to where you are now?
Well, the longest day is about 7 years ago now. The first 2 years were essentially me scrambling to try and create a life. I was very, very fortunate that, in particular, one man, an Indian gentleman who had seen some of my talks and lectures and really thought that for whatever reason I had something. He was very supportive and helped me. And then there were a couple of rich Indians who just wanted my services and then kind of would pay me a fee to help them with spiritual things or whatnot. And that kind of became the way that I started then growing this idea. Okay, this is, because the thing is, when you're a monk, a lot of the things that are touchy topics are not touchy. Because you if you don't identify with the body, you also don't identify with politics or gender identity or these. So these things become very easy to discuss. It also means that if I start discussing it with people in London in that way, it can come off as offensive because they don't necessarily understand that I'm not talking about them. I'm just talking about conditioning, right? So there's a period of time where I have to readjust my language. I have to learn what words and phrases people use. And I had to adjust also, quite frankly, to the fact that what people say and what they think and what they do in many cases are three different things in a place like London. Like where I come from, what I think, what I say, and what I do is just an extension of each other. It's one thing, and that saves you from a hell of a lot of stress because you don't have to remember what did I say and where am I and how do I wing it and how do I cut that corner. It's just is, right? So all of that took time for me because when someone says, "Oh yeah, I'm very excited about working with you," I thought they were genuinely excited to work with me. That's just something you say, right? You know. So and it's not like I'm not judging anyone. It's just that's the environment, and there are subtleties in the language that I just didn't know, right? So those first 2 years was really getting my mind reprogrammed and learn to shop. I have this thing I called the Sainsbury incident, where I went to Sainsbury to look for washing up liquid, and I realized there's a whole aisle There's like 50 products that just do one thing. And I'm like, surely they all work, right? So that was 2 years. And then really trying to, because then there's another side of it. How do I want to do it? Do I want to do videos? Do I want to do a YouTube channel? Do I want to have one-on-one clients? Do I want to do keynotes? Do I want to do articles, a blog? Like there's almost unlimited ways that you can transmit this knowledge. So that was another thing. I had a podcast at one point but I had no idea how to promote a podcast. So we had like 200 listeners, right? And it wasn't growing. That was the problem, right? So it's like, all right, what? So that was another period. And then, about 2 years ago, it started to click. Like I knew the language. Slowly you meet the right people, and like 6 months down the line, oh yeah, there was that guy. And then they put me in touch with, and it's sort of started to take off, right? And so the way it is now, I have mainly, like you mentioned earlier, I mainly work with CEOs one-to-one. I give lectures for predominantly IT, tech, but also within like lawyers and the financial sector. I just came back from Madrid, a tech conference there, and now I'm doing a podcast with you. And so it's kind of gotten its own life, and now I'm like, it's easy because I'm just seeing where it takes me. So I'm very happy with how it's panning out.
Which do you find more exciting? Is it the transmission of knowledge that you've acquired over many years, or is it the opportunity to transform people's experience of their day-to-day lives?
It's both, really. There's like sometimes I'm very, very blessed because I get to sometimes see a light go off in people's eyes. It's like they see the thing with this ancient knowledge. It's almost like it's in there in every single one of us. And so I say something and it's almost like they remember it. Oh yeah, that makes sense. It's not like I'm teaching them something new. I'm teaching them something old that we've forgotten. And to be able to see that, sometimes you could see it like, there it is, right? And they get it. That is like amazing. But then at the same time also, I find that I learn as much doing what I do as I did studying. Because what I see now is, how does this apply to a modern, fast-paced environment? Which it does. It does apply, but I'm seeing it applied in different scenarios and different angles, and people have questions I would have never thought of myself. And so it's fascinating to me. So it's both, right? Like the ability to give it, but also receive is like amazing, actually. Yeah.
And I'm going to call it practice, because
that's what it is.
A good umbrella.
I'm literally like, it's called sadhana. That literally means practice. So yeah, spot on.
As that evolves, what's next for you? Not in a quest kind of way, but just what projects are you working on and hoping to put into the world?
Yeah. So like I said, it's like a natural organic growth, which is brilliant because that means I don't have to push it. Right now, we are writing a book. We're looking at creating content because these well-being and mental health issues are becoming whole segments in the big publishing, like the New York Times, Washington Post, so on. So I'm working with one guy on how finding an output for that. So the whole thing is about making it scalable now to more people. And it's great if we're working with these high performers, because if it works for them, it'll work for pretty much anyone. If they have time, surely most other people also. We're also in the early stages of developing an app, because one thing I found with a lot of my clients was that can I get you to work with my entire company? But I am only one person. So we have to sort of take this knowledge and put it in a format where you can kind of have an indirect relationship with me. So we're quite excited at this point where it becomes like the scope is growing, and we're even talking about at one point like we need to build retreat center, but a permanent retreat center, because then you can have people come for a week and just get out of the crazy environment we're in. But you can also have people come and do degrees like the degrees that I did, so they can stay for 6 months, a year, whatever. And then, of course, you can do sustainable living project. That's all part of the Vedic culture, is organic farming. And so the whole thing is just escalating. Yeah, so it's a very exciting time.
I think you're going to have to move out of London if you want to have a retreat centre.
It will not be in central London, that's for sure. That's for sure.
Now, this might seem like a strange question given the nature of your longest day, but if you had to live it again, what food would you choose to help you in your decision-making?
Yeah, so what I did was I lived off nuts, basically, because they keep, right? I ate the fruit quite quickly. I was in a place that was like 35 degrees. So my diet wasn't great at that time. I would definitely, like a vegetarian diet, I would have some, like, given the circumstances, I didn't have a fridge. But dairy products, some like oats are really good, light but wholesome. And I would definitely also have a couple of sweets, like some chocolate or something. Everyone should eat a little chocolate every day.
I love that. That is wonderful wisdom and advice. And I think that perhaps should be taken as gospel.
I think because most people, I find, they think that's like, even those heavy practitioners, they take spirituality as like, you're not allowed to enjoy yourself. The more rigid and harsh it is and restrained, the more spiritual you are. No. What's the point of that? Enjoy life, but don't over-enjoy it. Don't overindulge, because then it has the adverse effect, right? But if we can't eat something nice and eat something like that makes us happy, what's the point,
Well, I agree.
Yeah.
And on that note, all I can say is thank you so much for sharing your experiences. I'm sure they're going to be very interesting to many of our listeners. And I hope that many of your projects come to fruition. And I look forward to seeing this app.
Thank you so much. And yeah, whether it comes to fruition or not, it's all happening in exactly the way that it's supposed to.
Absolutely. Thanks, Klaus.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to a Broadstairs Consulting Limited podcast. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. Tune in soon to hear the next installment of The Longest Day. Copyright 2023. Production copyright Broadstairs Consulting Limited. All rights reserved.